Up next is All In, creating an inclusive workplace for all, the next 3 actions. In this session, we'll be hearing from 4 fantastic speakers. Catherine Jacob, OBE, Chair of the Inclusion Working Group. Kate Waters, President of WACL. Shez Iqbal, Mentor at MIFA. And Anna DL, founder of 40 Over 40. Good morning to you all. Catherine, over to you.
Thanks, Nina. Good morning and welcome to the All In session, creating an inclusive workplace for all. These are our next 3 actions. I'm Catherine Jacob, Chair of the Inclusion Working Group. Last year, we revealed the results of the All In survey, which was the UK advertising's first fully sector-wide survey and was powered by the Advertising Association, ISBA and the IPA, and in association with Kantar. And the All In Census gathered data from 16,000 participants across the industry, marketing professionals, and it provided the first ever insights into the representation and experience of the UK advertising's workforce, plus data for us to benchmark progress from. And I think we said from the start, this is a marathon, not a sprint. The All In Action Plan set out 3 initial areas of focus for the industry to achieve greater inclusion. And as always, based on the data, we're now ready to announce the next 3 actions that have been developed by the Inclusion Working Group. And these actions taking place now have been developed in association with WACL, Bloom, Media for All, and 40 Over 40. And all these groups include people with a lived experience. So the actions are to improve the experience and representation of women, Asian talent, and older talent. And during this session, we're going to explore each of these in turn and identify the next action. And I've got a fantastic panel here with me today who represent the groups. So the fabulous Kate, President of WACL and Director of Client Strategy and Planning at ITV. Shez, who's a mentor at MIFA, and he's a Director of Partnerships. Sorry, I've just changed your title completely. Publisher Partnerships at Criteo. And Anna Daliel, who's founder of 40 Over 40, which I couldn't say earlier today, and SVP Markhams at Momentum Worldwide. So welcome, my fabulous panel. Kate, if I can start with you. Can you please tell us what the All In Census data revealed about the experience and representation of women, and also what the call to action is?
Thanks very much, Catherine. So first of all, can I just say thank you to All In for partnering with WACL and Bloom on this. And we're really, really pleased that taking the flexible first checklist that we've developed will be the action on gender. But before we get to that, I think it's worth just taking a little bit of a kind of step back to look at the data and to understand how we got to this as the action. So I think, as you've already mentioned, Catherine, it's really worth remembering that the All In Census is a huge study. 16,000 individuals. It explores representation, across all levels of seniority. It digs into experiences across issues from career development and progression to working patterns and work-life balance, to culture in the workplace, to physical and mental health, to people's experience of discrimination in the workplace. So, in other words, it's a kind of incredibly broad and very robust survey. And I think, therefore, it's worth noting that kind of one of the biggest sort of takeouts from me from the data is that really, sadly, overall, across pretty much all of those dimensions, women report having a less positive experience of advertising and communications as an industry to work in than men. And often, actually, what we see also is an intersectionality there. So women who are older, women from Black or minority ethnic backgrounds, women with a disability, women from the LGBTQ plus community, all report, as I say, kind of less positive experiences. But I guess the most kind of obvious thing to note is around kind of levels of representation. So I think we see what's known as the kind of classic glass pyramid effect. So at the most sort of junior levels, at entry levels in the industry, women make up kind of pretty much 8 out of 10 members of the industry. But by the time you get to the C-suite, women account for only 40% of those roles. So you get this extraordinary drop-off in representation, and it gets worse the older that you get. So I'm sure that's something that Anna will refer to later. But I think when you start digging into what might be going on, there are some clues that kind of point to what the real sort of issue is. So the first thing to note is that when you hit around sort of 35 to 40, that's where you see women flip from being in the majority in roles to being in a significant minority. And certainly when you dig into some of the kind of attitudinal data, what we find is a staggering statistic, which is that 10 times more women than men believe that the parental leave that they take when they've had children or adopted them, is a negative influence on their career progression. So that's more than half of all women, compared with only 5% of men. Moreover, you then dig into issues like the perceived kind of impact of family responsibilities, where twice as many women as men think that has an impact on their career. And similarly, about double the number of women who work part-time feel that that has a kind of negative impact on their career again. And certainly, I think, when you look at the overall statistics, I think they might be onto something, given those levels of representation. So overall, the kind of depressing sort of consequence of all of this is that actually women end up being 6 times more likely to feel discriminated against because of their gender. And I think it's no surprise, therefore, that around 15%, so that's like 1 in 6 of women in the industry, are thinking about leaving as a result of that discrimination and as a result of their experience. And that, again, is nearly twice the number of men. So that's kind of enough about the problem. I guess, what do we do about it? Well, we in WACL and in Bloom have felt for a long time that flexible working is one of the kind of key strategies that businesses can use to try and address some of these issues. And I think it's important here to note that it's not just flexible working for women, it's flexible working for all genders. Because actually, if we make flexible working the norm across the industry, particularly in senior roles, as well as in potentially slightly more junior ones, what we do is enable women to stay in those roles for longer. We end up with a situation where actually we may be able to address the gender pay gap, but also what we can do is offer men the advantages of working more flexibly as well. So it's really is a strategy that works for everybody. And I think a really important point to make here is that when we talk about flexible working, we're not just talking about working from home, which is obviously the sort of version of flexible working that we've all had to get used to, whether we liked it or not, over the last couple of years. But we're talking about job shares, we're talking about working part-time, we're talking about compressed hours or sort of flexible hours. The flexible working comes in loads of different forms, and that makes it easier, I think, for employers to implement, and also obviously offers more choice to people who want to take it up. So what's the first step here? What's the action that we want people to take? Because it's a big area, and it's one that obviously takes time. And therefore, we think that a really good first step is taking our flexible first checklist. Now, this sounds sort of tick boxy, and it's really not meant to be that at all. What it is a self-assessment tool. We've developed it in partnership with the industry, with HR professionals. And what it does is guide you through all the different aspects of flexible working that you need to think about if you want to do more than just pay lip service to this as a strategy in your organisation. So it'll talk to you about the different elements of flexible working, the way in which you might advertise jobs, the importance of advertising all jobs as flexible, the way in which you track the impact of flexible working on the people concerned and on the business. And so it can act in a number of different ways. So first of all, helping you understand the topic better, setting a benchmark for yourself, and obviously enabling you to kind of come back time and again and hopefully monitor your progress against those issues. And for those that do really well, we can offer a standard. And for those that are the kind of real champions of this, there's an even kind of higher order sort of standard that you can get to use in your email, to use in your communications as a company. So it's a really easy first step, and it's one that we think can be incredibly powerful for changing the experience of not just women, but also men in the industry for the better.
That's great, Kate. That sounds doable and eminently achievable. And just in case you've got any questions after our sessions, Slido is available for you to pepper our fabulous experts with your questions. And we'll be coming to that at the end of the session. Shez, can you talk us through our next action, which is to improve the representation experience of Asian talent, please?
Sure. Hi, Catherine. Hi, everyone. First and foremost, of course, thank you for the collaboration with us at MIFA. I'm absolutely happy to discuss the next actions here. To start with, the All In Census results. If you haven't read it, then read it. Some of it is alarming, but it really spotlights a number of improvement opportunities which need immediate review. From an Asian person's perspective, the results were difficult to digest, but not surprising. For example, 27% of Asian respondents reported they are likely to leave the industry due to a lack of inclusion or experiencing discrimination. The largest group within that felt this were Muslim like myself. That's 32% of Muslims who are likely to leave our industry due to their lived experiences. And Hindus at 27% and Sikhs at 23% are just behind. These figures really hit home for me. I've certainly experienced some discrimination and felt excluded, and I'm hoping these next steps will help us retain some of our fantastic Asian talent. The first step and the first thing we in the working group wanted to challenge organizations and leaders to do is to be curious. Be curious means exactly that. Speak to your employees, try to understand and recognize both religious and cultural differences, and take the time to appreciate the diversity between different Asian communities. There are lots of nuances across those various Asian communities. We also considered the need for mentoring, for example, and the value of bringing in external support like MIFA, and also how to make Asian talent feel more included within an organization. There are some really, really simple and quick wins here. For example, offering non-alcoholic options at gatherings, similar to how we consider other dietary needs. The guide as a whole is simple, practical, and includes a range of suggestions to help organizations be more inclusive as employers.
That's fantastic. And I think too, the driving force behind everything that we do at All In is that it is those small steps that are just easy to take that will gradually make a more inclusive workplace. And back to Alessandra's point earlier about talent, we're losing talent that we spent a lot of time recruiting, and yet we're in a talent crisis, and these actions will really, really help. Anna, you're going to address our final action point of this session, which is ageism and how we improve the representation and experience of older people in our workplace. So over to you.
Thanks, Catherine. And again, the same sentiment as everybody else. Big thank you to the All In Census, and actually working really closely with Catherine and the team, and including 40 over 40 in the Ageism Working Group. So let's first of all dig into the data. So together we've reviewed the All In data, which showed that only 4% of respondents were aged 55 to 64, compared to 17% of the UK population. And most of those over 55 who took part in the report, it's no surprise, were in C-suite roles. It showed that an alarming 43% of respondents felt age limited their career. So these, fundamentally, these issues need to be addressed if we want the industry, to be more diverse and inclusive. And, the point around retaining talent as well, we've got to tackle ageism with action. And I think culture plays a really important role in this. And obviously culture comes from the top and it runs throughout businesses. And we've got to start somewhere to educate everyone and bridge those generational gaps within the industry. So I think, it's important to note that ageism can't just be resolved with one policy. And we know that ageism happens consciously and unconsciously in everyday environments, but we've got to start somewhere. So that's why the group that I've been working with, we've created a policy called shared experiences. And this is to take positive action in retaining talented people and to really make people feel valued. The policy is really simple. People working within the advertising industry who've got over 15 years experience can be paired with people under 5 years experience to learn from each other. So it's not a mentoring scheme per se, it's more around reverse learning. And that's important to say that, because I think both people are equally learning from each other, and both parties have got knowledge to share. And we've purposely haven't split the policy out by age or seniority, but by experience, because we believe this will help the knowledge exchange, and we want to remove any potential barriers. And we've made it as simple as possible for everyone to adopt, and you can adapt the policy as well. So agencies, larger agencies, smaller independents, to make it work within your business. So we've produced a best practice guide for how the sessions will work, and that's all within the policy. It's something that you do over a 6-month period, and you can get a copy of that obviously from the All In Hub. And we really want to, as many businesses, agencies, brands as possible, to take up shared experiences and really address ageism with action.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I think that, there's similar themes coming out here, aren't there, about kind of, making people, that whole inclusion piece, and it isn't just about a one size fits all. Kate, can I go back to you? Can you talk about the process, about what happens after taking the assessment? What are the first steps, and how do you think it will help? What will the employee experience be of it, and the business learnings of it, please?
Okay, thanks, Catherine. So the checklist itself takes probably about 10 to 12 minutes to complete. And as I said, it sort of guides you through all the different aspects of flexible working that you need to think about. So that might be about what type of flexible working is offered, your recruitment processes, and the way in which you think about the way in which jobs are advertised to make sure that they're advertised as flexible. It talks about the way that you track the impact of flexible working. It talks about the sort of technology that is provided to support those who are working more flexibly. So it really kind of makes you think about and explore and I guess investigate all of the different factors that will drive a kind of successful experience of flexible working. So off the back of that, what you get is a score, and that score will basically tell you if you're kind of, where you are on your journey towards being essentially a sort of champion of flexible working. So you get a standard if you complete the questionnaire to a certain level of competency, or if you can kind of answer yes to more of it, you will get that kind of champion's standard for flexible working. And what we really hope is that businesses will take that, look at where they could sort of make some improvements and do better, work with the appropriate departments, that might be with HR, that might be with technology, to do what they need to do to support people better. And then hopefully that will result in a much better, more proactive and fairer and more equitable kind of approach to these sorts of issues in the workplace. And we hope as well that people will go back time and again. So they might go back next year and do it and see if they've improved, and look for more areas that they can make those kind of gradual improvements. So I think just like the other speakers have said, what we've tried to do is to create something that gives people that first step and helps them plan for the future. So it's not a difficult first step, it's a really easy thing for everybody to do. And I hope it will just help people learn and really help people think about the benefit of this to their entire workforce, not just to women, but to men as well.
Great. And I think we're going to go to audience questions now, if there are any. If not, I have plenty more to bother you all with.
Catherine, let's go to one from Matt Bourne to kick us off. He wants to know, do you plan to repeat the All In Census? If so, when? And what do you hope to see in the next set of results if you do repeat it?
I think I can answer that. We will be repeating it next year. We've said we're going to do it every 2 years so our actions can land, and in the process that we're going through across the 9 underrepresented groups. So it will happen again in 2023. And we are hoping to see the adoption of all of the actions that we've started, the 3 we're talking about today and the 3 that we launched last June. And we're hoping that by marking our own homework, we'll see some substantive improvements in inclusion in our workplace. I mean, Shez, what would you like to see out of the next set of results?
I think in terms of the next set of results, it would be great for more organizations to, of course, get involved. It would be great to see some improvement within the Asian talent in particular. Like I said, the framework is extremely simple, and to get some more positive outcome across Asian talent, to support the retention of Asian talent within the industry would be fantastic. And I think that the All In Census in particular is a great opportunity and one of the only opportunities to see the difference that we can make through these sort of frameworks. So seeing more uptake from organizations and respondents, and also seeing the improvement of some of these frameworks as well would be fantastic.
Great, thank you. Nina, are there any other questions?
Well, just a couple from me, actually, just in terms of from what has been said so far. Is there any move or desire to, when you're talking about ethnic minority talent that was lost, to try and get those people back? Catherine, you were explaining that they've already gone through lots of training and experience, but felt that they weren't included. Is there a move to try and get those people back into the industry?
I would hope so, yes. I mean, some of it is dependent on organisations. But yeah, I mean, if we can create an industry that is open to everyone, then their experience will be better. Our experience as businesses will be better and we'll be more reflective of the communities that we serve. And I think, you know, to the point before, which is when we looked at Black representation, 32% of Black talent was thinking of leaving. And why is that when we're spending all of our time recruiting people? We bring them into our organisations, we don't make them feel that they belong. And despite all the proof that more diverse workplaces are generally sort of more revenue generative and more profitable.
And what feedback have you had, if you have had this at this stage, in terms of what works in terms of making people feel valued?
Oh, shall I hand that to the panel? Anna, have you got any feedback on that? Because you've run 40 over 40. What's your feedback on that?
I think it's just making sure that people have a voice and that everybody has the opportunity to, you know, to share their their points of view and feel heard. And I think that, and even having within agencies, certainly at Momentum where we work, we have committees and groups that come together, and that really does help with retention, you know, of people from a, you know, different ethnic background. So I think, yeah, for me, I think it's just about making sure that everybody's heard.
Okay, a question in from Rosin Donnelly. Great work by the team and exciting plans. Big thumbs up there. We know diversity drives better business results. Are you measuring the impact of the plans?
Well, hello, Rasheen. Yes, we are. When the census comes out next year, when we get the census results next year, we'll be measuring how well we've done and doing a comparative. And then we will, of course, keep building on our initial actions again. The census was anonymous, so we can't take it back to individual companies. But I think it just makes sense, doesn't it? It's not rocket science that if you've got a happier, more included and a workforce that feel that they belong, they'll stay longer and you'll get better results.
Yeah, okay. In terms of, I think it was Shaz who said a lot of the findings were alarming. I certainly found a lot of them alarming and shocking. One thing that Alexandra mentioned in her opening presentation was the number of people with disabilities in the industry who had reported feeling bullied. I mean, that really was incredibly shocking to hear that. Kate, you're nodding. Perhaps you can respond to that in terms of, were you also shocked? And the key question, what can be done about that when you've got people reporting that because of their disability, they are feeling as if they're being intimidated in the workplace?
I think it's important to say, first of all, I don't represent that group. I don't have a disability, but I think it doesn't surprise me. I think because we see minorities across all sorts of different groups feeling like they have a less positive experience. And so I think the most important thing is to, you know, we've taken the first important step, which is to ask the question and to understand the scale of the problem. I think the action that we take has to be to kind of respond to that, because I think too often we listen to people and then we don't do enough in response. So I think clear action plans around all of these areas, helping and supporting businesses to change, giving those groups voices and the power to sort of change their own experience, to kind of listen and to understand what they want to do and how they want us to change our behaviour as a result. I think those are probably the areas that we need to start. But I think the wake-up call for me to the industry is to recognise that these experiences are being lived and felt, you know, day in, day out. And we really need, you know, if we want to deal with the talent crunch that we find ourselves in, we've got so many good people. We have to listen and we have to respond to what they're saying.
One for Kate and probably Anna, actually, in terms of talking about women in the workplace and their quite hideous experiences from what we've heard from the census results. Has it been taken into account the effectively the new problem for women, that many of them who are looking at hybrid models for the future are feeling penalised about whether they'll be judged differently because they are combining some element of childcare with also working from home as well as in the office? Perhaps, Anna, you can comment on that first.
I mean, certainly the agency that I work for, we've got a hybrid working policy in place. So yeah, I think you absolutely 100% have to look at that, as well as, you know, those flexible working, I guess, to Kate's point earlier. So yeah, for sure.
Shall I just comment on that? I think this is something that I've thought quite a lot about, actually, because I do worry that as we go back to a hybrid model, there's the danger of almost a two-tier workforce emerging. So, you know, there are those people who like to work from the office and for whom it's easier to work for the office, perhaps because they have fewer responsibilities in terms of childcare or caring for an elderly relative. And so they will be back in. And those who have more responsibilities will choose to work from home. And we saw during the pandemic that women took a much higher burden of childcare and caring responsibilities. And so I do worry that if we're not careful, we could end up with a workforce where we have more men going back into the office, more women staying at home. And if we're not careful to sort of manage for presenteeism, that we will be in a position where people who are more visible, people who are there in the office, may be getting more of the kind of benefits associated with that. So I think we have a big duty to managers, actually, to try and help them understand how to manage better for output and for outcome, rather than, I think, you know, the world that we could so easily slip it back into, which is one of presenteeism.
Another question on another key element of the workforce, I suppose, in terms of when you're talking about diversity and inclusivity, from Imogen Proctor. She says the survey found that there was a significant lack of working class talent in the industry. What is being done to address this? I mean, that's also crucial, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And there is a working group on social mobility. That was one of the first actions that we launched together with Disability and Black Representation in Marketing. We've worked with the Social Mobility Commission, and all of the information that we're talking about our first three actions is available. We've done a series of how-to sessions, and they're available on the AA's All In Hub, so you can access that information. And of course, just talk to the AA or the IPA or ISBAR. Our mighty champions within there can help you access that information if you can't easily find it.
Okay, and briefly, just one more quick question. If we don't see people from all sorts of backgrounds in senior positions across the industry, that's the point that all of this changes, right? And we are seeing some of it, but we're not quite there yet. Is that the point where it changes lock, stock and barrel?
I think so. I think, you know, a lot of agencies commit and say that they'll sign up to these things, but I think actions kind of speak louder than words. I know that sounds a bit of a cliche, but I think we've got to actually see the take up of all of the recommendations that we're putting into place.
Yeah, I think there's an issue where we're investing quite well in terms of bringing individuals into the industry. There's, you know, the frameworks here that have been presented across all three areas talk about retention. I think retention is really, really important. We're losing fantastic talent, you know, to other industries, and that retention is going to help us move everyone up, and that's going to ultimately, exactly as you say, help us reach the goals of getting diversity at a higher level. And that diversity at the higher level is again going to further support getting more people into the industry and put a fantastic and more positive spotlight on the industry as well. At the moment, we're competing with other industries for great talent. We might be able to get them in at grassroots, but we're losing them in the middle. And that maintenance, that support, it's got to start with a conversation. understanding their needs and giving them a voice is going to help retain them, support them, and ultimately allow them to step up into the boardroom.
Absolutely, Catherine.
Thanks, Shez.
A really key session. I'm sure we'd love to finish with a final thought from yourself.
Well, just to say the how-to sessions are available. There'll be how-to sessions on these 3 actions. They're available on the All In Hub. Measurement is absolutely key to this. And so in June, there'll be the introduction of the All In Champions. And we'll be looking for companies who can evidence that they've, actioned all of our initiatives so far. And then we'll be repeating the All In Census in March 23 and every 2 years thereafter. And on behalf of the Inclusion Working Group, the industry has responded beautifully to this. And what we need to see is this momentum carrying on. And I'd also like to thank Anna, Shez and Kate for giving so generously of their time to help us create a better, kinder and more inclusive workplace in advertising.
Yeah, thank you for all that, Catherine, and thanks from me as well to Kate, Shez and Anna for joining us this morning. Thank you.